I'll tell you when. Friends, we have a short function right now. I promise to tell a secret. It so happened there are two. One is already I have displayed. This institute was inaugurated by Professor Chandrasekhar in the year 1962 on January 3rd. And we are entering into the 50th year today. And this is an important occasion for both. That is one of the reasons. It's 100th year for Chandrasekhar. And this is 50th, start of the 50th year. And as I mentioned earlier, we plan to have several programs throughout the year to honor Chandrasekhar's contributions. But of course, it will be more focused on what is it we can do in his areas where he has contributed enormously. And that would be our focus. And as it is better not to hero worship, but try to do good work which he can inspire or inspired earlier. So now the function will be essentially our director will hand over the copy of this book to director Abhay Ashtekar, and he will release the book and say a few words, followed by editor of the book, Radhika Ramnath, who is daughter of Chandrasekhar's brother's daughter, youngest daughter. Okay, Ramnath. And she will say a few words about this book as well as about Chandrasekhar. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so maybe I'll begin just with this book release. So I'm delighted that Professor Chandrasekhar's family has prepared this book to mark the centennial, and it is my pleasure to officially release this book, which is S. Chandrasekhar, Man of Science, and is published by HarperCollins. I was fortunate enough to know Professor Chandrasekhar quite well, and those of us who knew him well just simply called him Chandra. So in the spirit of this Chandrayana, I would like to take a few minutes to pay tribute to Chandra. More specifically, I would like to share with you a few thoughts which I also shared with the participants of the Chandra Symposium in Chicago last October. I first met Chandra when I arrived at the University of Chicago as a green graduate student in the 70s. I had done my undergraduate work in India, and to me, as to most other Indian students in science, Chandra's stature was godlike. We had heard of the innumerable discoveries that he had made, whose meaning and scope we understood only in the vaguest terms. Still, there was a feeling of awe and admiration and a conviction that for a single person to have achieved all this, he had to be superhuman. But this is over 35 years ago. Over this long stretch of time, I came to know him, and my appreciation for him deepened. When faced with difficult decisions, I often found myself asking, what would Chandra have advised? While thinking of this Chandrayana celebration, I realized that the image that I have of him has also evolved significantly. I now think of him more as a philosopher in the old and purer sense of the term, rather than a godlike figure. And I would like to explain why. The word philosophy, of course, has its origin in Greek and can be translated as love of knowledge. And indeed, ancient philosophers were interested in deepening their knowledge of the natural world. But their interest also had another dimension, the meaning of human life, ethics, and the proper way to live. In today's terms, then, philosophy had a dual purpose, science and wisdom. But as time evolved, this changed. Spinoza was perhaps the last great representative of this dual tradition. Over the past 300 years, science came on its own and took over the inquiry of the natural world. In a sense, philosophy was a victim of its own success. It gave birth to astronomy, physics, chemistry, and biology, but the offsprings developed their own methods and rendered the old philosophical probings of the natural world obsolete. But in addition, philosophy also abandoned, in a certain extent, the quest of wisdom in favor of knowledge. The gap between the world of ideas and the world of individual life has become such that today men and women of knowledge no longer see the need to be living examples of wisdom. In personal pursuits, often there is little difference between, say, an average banker or a lawyer on the one hand, and a philosopher or a scientist on the other. Among leading men and women, there is much brilliance. There are amazing technical skills, but these generally are not matched by the deep principles, strong discipline, and inner calmness that guide the wise and help them not lose their way in the face of deep problems and conflicting emotions. It is perhaps not surprising then that we find quotes from leading scientists saying, for example, the more one understands the universe, the more pointless it all seems. This was not so when men and women of science also pursued wisdom. Chandra, to me, was a man of knowledge to whom pursuit of wisdom, in this sense, was second nature. He was driven by intellectual curiosity with a sense of detachment for worldly concerns, honors, fame, and fortune. As he himself said, he explored hallways of science that were not particularly popular. His motivation came from inner, strong conviction about the natural world and a deep sense of aesthetics. The way he reacted to Eddington in this unfortunate episode that we all know about is a marvelous example of his wisdom and illustrates very clearly the inner strength he found in his strong convictions. It is because the motivation in his pursuit of science was so pure, and because he had inner ethical clarity, that he could calmly navigate his way through what would normally have been a tumultuous storm. And there are many other examples of Chandra's actions that reflect the high road he took also in everyday life. Yes, fame and honors followed him year after year. But that is not what he sought. His eyes were set on nobler goals. A flower just is. It does not strive to be fragrant. This is why I no longer have the image of Chandra as a distant god. As Hermann Hesse would have said, he was far too nobler. He was a sage in the old tradition. Not only did he live by his convictions, but those convictions arose from an authentic wisdom that truly liberates mind from confusion and is reflected in a unique fashion one is able to act. This is the reason why I often find myself asking, what would Chandra have advised? Thank you. Okay. I would like to ask Radhika to make some remarks.
Good evening, everyone. As I look back at the sequence of events that led eventually to the publishing of this book, it seems to me that in some way it was meant to happen, because there was no real one person driving it, and it's been the result of efforts and ideas of a lot of people. It actually started last year when a group of academicians and media people who were thinking about how to celebrate my uncle's centenary approached several members of the family saying that it would be a good idea if we could put some reminiscences of him down, because a number of people who knew him personally and, you know, in a family situation were dwindling by the year, given that he would have been 100 had he been alive. And they felt that, you know, whoever was there, if we could put it down, it would be a worthwhile exercise. So the family thought about it for a while, and we thought that it's a great thing to do just for the family itself, you know, just to have a record for ourselves. And so we started going about doing it. And that was all it was meant to be, until it so happened that in another turn of events, someone happened to mention to HarperCollins that Chandra's family was doing this, and I found myself in a meeting with the publisher of HarperCollins, who immediately showed interest in publishing it, and not only did she want to publish it, she gave a wonderful suggestion that we include in it some writings and lectures of my uncle, which really bring out the person that he was, you know, not from an outside perspective, but from an internal perspective. And so it was taking all these ideas together that the book took the shape that it did and came out the way it has. It's specifically aimed at students, the common reader, to really get an idea of Chandra. He's been sort of, since he wasn't in India for so many years and people didn't get to meet him so much, he's sort of remained an image and a name, and the idea of this book is to bring him as a person of flesh and blood, you know, to everyone around. So the book is actually in two parts, and the first part comprises of his general lectures, which we chose on subjects which we thought would appeal to people, and we found it most rewarding going through it ourselves in making these selections. So in fact, one of his writings is Science in Pre- and Post-Independence India, which actually includes how the Math Science Institute was formed. You know, that's part of what he has written, how it all came about from his perspective. It includes subjects that he thought about very deeply, you know, pursuit of science, what motivates one, as Professor Ashtekar just mentioned. So one of his essays is The Pursuit of Science, Its Motivations. And he thought a lot about creativity and the patterns of creativity, and he's brought it out beautifully in a small talk that he gave on Newton and Michelangelo. So it's a varied subject topic list that is covered in the first section. And the second section comprises of reminiscences of family members of several generations, including his wife, who, it is his centenary year, but I must mention it is also her 100th birthday. And she celebrated it just a couple of months ago in Chicago. So she's very much there, and it includes her thoughts on the 60 years that they spent together. So this is how it happened, and it's really been a dream run. Things have been just ideas have been coming in and they've got implemented, and it's just happened that it's come out the way it has. We just wrote to Professor Dr. Abdul Kalam if he would write a foreword. In fact, I sent him a message on his website because I know that, you know, Dr. Kalam looks at every email that he gets. So I just sent him an email on his website. In 2 days, I had a response that he would be most happy to do it. And when he got the book, he's read it completely, from the beginning to the end, the manuscript, and you can see that in the foreword that he has thoughtfully put together. So it's been a complete dream run. The only glitch we ran into was today, that we actually wanted to have the book available outside for everyone to look at. It's taken a bit of time in getting here from Delhi, and I'm told by HarperCollins that it will be available from day after tomorrow. At the conference, it will be there. So I would just like to thank Math Science for providing such an appropriate forum. I can't imagine something more than a conference which is being held in his memory. And I and the family, extended family, many of whom are here today, feel extremely honored that it has been released by Professor Ashtekar, whom we have heard about from my uncle in various conversations, and know that he's a person whom he personally liked and respected, and that is not such a long list of people, you know. So it's very special. So I would just like to conclude by saying that for me personally, it's been a privilege to have been associated in a small way in making this book happen. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Abhay. Thank you, Radhika, for making this book release function possible. And, well, we can't help always. The books probably will be available by day after tomorrow here in our place. And anyone can see it. And anyone who wants to buy, they can also buy it.